Hello, hello! I am super excited to be sharing this snowy painting with you. To start, I'm just mixing a very light pink using some crimson and titanium white, and I'm just going to start scrubbing that into the upper left of my canvas for the sky. I'm going to add some ultramarine to that color to make it more purpley, and that's going to be my gradient for my sky. So I'm just gonna lay that in and then sort of blend it together using these scrubbing motions. The less paint you have on your brush, the easier it will be to blend, so you're not just overlapping colors. Now that I've made my purple color a little bit darker, I'm going to start sketching in the trees in the background. And the further away you want the trees to look, the lighter and more blue you want the color to be. The darker and more red the color is, the closer it's going to look to your eye. So I'm keeping that in mind as I'm mixing my different colors and layering my trees in the background. I'm just sort of tapping them into the canvas. Again, the less paint you have on your brush, the more scrubby you can make them look. But right now I'm just trying to get the colors onto the canvas. I can go back in and add more details later. But I want this to look sort of misty. And so the less detail, the more foggy and distant these trees are going to look. One more important thing is that I'm mixing all of my colors right on top of the previous color, and I'll be doing that for most of this painting, and that's going to ensure that my color palette is cohesive. Rather than mixing everything separately, this is going to ensure that everything really blends together. So here I'm using my dry filbert brush again, and I'm beginning to blend the trees down into the rest of the painting. I'm using scrubbing motions to just transfer the paint I already have. Again, I'm trying to keep everything misty and light. And I'm using that same purple color, I keep bringing it back, to sketch in my scene. So I have the cliff on the left and the trees on the right. And now I'm going to begin blocking in color. So I'm not paying too much attention to the lights and darks, I'm just trying to fill my canvas. I do end up adding a lot of detail to this painting, but right now the detail isn't what's important because detail needs to be built upon a base layer. And so getting that base layer on my canvas as quickly and efficiently as possible is what's most important. I mixed a slightly darker color for over on the cliff. I added some raw sienna to warm it up a bit, and I'm just focusing on blending my underpainting because I don't want the cliff to stand out too much. I want it all to mesh together in the end because everything's covered with the same blanket of snow. So for my tree underpainting, I added some black to my purple mixture to make a very dark color, and I'm using the same scrubbing motion that I used for the background trees, except for this time I'm adding a lot more detail. This is just the underpainting. I'll be adding more on top of it later, but what I really need to be cautious of right now is not overdoing it and adding too many branches. Overworking a painting is my most common mistake, and it's what I end up regretting the most. The tree was just an underpainting, so it's okay that it got covered up. I'll add it back in later. I'm going to have some rocks in my painting, and so I just added in some shadows to indicate where they're going to end up, and some highlights to show the mounds of snow. To help these trees to blend into the background, I mixed a grayed out version of purple by adding some white to the color I had for the tree, and I'm just adding a layer of color on top of the background. very, very, very dark purple that I'm mixing to do the underpainting for these trees over here. I'm just scrubbing as much paint as I can, as quickly as I can, to cover as much surface as I can. The only place I'm really paying attention to detail is here on the edge where it meets the rest of the canvas. I'm just painting in some branches. Unfortunately, there is a glare, so it's a little bit hard to see what colors I'm using, but I'm going in with straight black right now to add in the details of the trees. I'm also using a little bit of titanium white to add more detail. This is meant to be the snow resting on the branches. So now I'm going to be adding in some shadows for my fence, and I'm going to add in my rocks and some shadows for those, but I wanted to introduce you to my secret weapon for blending acrylic paint, and that would be a wet paper towel. So acrylic paints dry fairly quickly compared to other mediums, and you cannot go back in and reactivate them to blend. So with a painting like this where blending is very, very crucial, this has become a favorite tool of mine. I can just block in whatever colors I want and then take my wet paper towel over top and just kind of scrub with my fingers, and it's going to just melt that paint right into the canvas. And so that's what I use for all of my shadows in this painting. They just kind of make everything fuzz out and really look like it belongs. I'm using an angle brush and a very dark brown color to add in my fence posts, following that shadow line and getting thinner and shorter as I go back into the distance to give the painting some perspective. These fence posts are more like logs and kind of round and imperfect, so I don't have to worry about making everything square and even, which makes the job much, much easier for me. I like to imagine an inexperienced farmer added this fence to protect the valley or to mark off the path. I'm using tapping motions with my brush to add in the snow that's going to be laying on top of the fence posts. And I'm going to break out that wet paper towel to add in my shadows. The shadows need to be following the shape of the snow they're laying on, so that's why they're sort of curving up into the hill. Some of the lines are even wavy to sort of indicate snowdrifts. Now I'm adding in more detail to the pine trees over on the right. I'm adding in a little bit of brown for the trunks of the trees and a little bit of snow to just really define the branches on both trees. When adding highlights, it's really important to remember that when everything's light, nothing's light. So I need to make sure I'm leaving in dark spaces so that the trees have depth. Lastly, I'm just adding in the final touches of detail, a little bit of darks for my rocks, a little bit of highlights for the snow. All in all, this painting took me between 6 and 7 hours to complete. So I obviously cut out a lot of detail work here, which is mostly okay because I'm pretty sure my head got in the way for a lot of it. Frost once said, "The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep." Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed making this video.